having access to the operating system source code itself and having to lay all of this on top of it and deal with the framework that Apple gives you. And so that's the beginning. And these fonts actually, I'm sure some of you may not agree, but they're actually very legible. So I'm going to go into the system folder. And
are those fonts like individual sizes, like Helvetica 8 and Helvetica 10 and Helvetica 12, or is it true size?
They are fixed size, and it's 8 by 8. Right. So the only one I have is this screen font, and there are actually a few other fonts that I want to play with, but I haven't really started to look at them yet because I've been doing some other things like localizing the menus. So let's go to the system folder.
To follow up on that question, is that a custom font or is it a built-in system font?
That is a custom font that Ushiroda made for the sake of this software. So he did it all himself, and actually it's not this messy now, it's all one font file, but the original setup for this involved 16 font files containing 256 characters each, because that was the only way they could get it to work. And what they ended up doing was making their own font file type. That there was actually some, they actually sent a request to Apple to have it made an official 2DS file type, but that was by late 1993, and everything was about to get canned anyway, so it didn't really get followed through on. So let's go into the system folder. And we have a Japanese folder here, which contains stuff that this system uses. And here are our font files. So we have two fonts. We have so basically everything is in these two font files. And they are a special type of font file. And it's actually, it thinks it's an Apple III font, but it's not. So we also have a file called dict.sys, which is a text file that we should be able to open and take a look at. It's a really big file. And it's not really meant to be open, but this is the index that the whole system uses to figure out how to convert the input that you give it into Japanese characters. Back to the Finder. There's also a preference file for kanji edit, which is a text editor, which I will show you also a little bit later. So the real meat of this is in system.setup, and here I have two files. I have JM, which is the code that allows the 2DS to draw Japanese text to the screen. That does not allow you to input Japanese text. So you can run it with just JM, and you can read Japanese text files. You can display applications with Japanese language menus, but you can't type in any Japanese text. Up here I have FFGS, which is the front-end processor that allows me to control space and get that bar on the bottom of the screen and type in all of the Japanese characters. And it converts them into kanji. And that's basically all you need to get your 2GS working with Japanese. However, in order to display the interface, there is also an NDA called sysfont, which is right here, and then it has its own preferences. And what that looks like is this. So I have this NDA, and this is the only application software that I'm going to show you today that I do not have the source code for. But I would actually like to see it done a slightly different way. So I've got it set to JM Gothic, which is the font that comes with JM. And that's how I have all of this text displaying here. Although, as you can see, you may have noticed, it doesn't apply to some places, and there are reasons for that as well. So here we are we have a system that can display Japanese text, and we can input Japanese text. So now that that's there, what do we do with it? And I decided a couple of years ago, at KFest actually, that I really wanted the interface for my IIGS to be in Japanese, because that's just how I like to use computers. So I started opening up the Finder in ResEdit and just manually changing all of the text strings and using the software the way that I showed you in Teach, which took a really long time and it was really tedious. And there were a couple of things that didn't work very well, like in the file copy dialog file copy dialog box. There are some resources. Let's go into ResEdit really quick. Utilities. Let's take a look at the Finder. These resources are a problem. And you get this thing, and it's all this styled text, and they contain information about the font and the style information. And if you try to edit some of these manually in ResEdit and save them and then just go back and do things, you'll get a lot of junk text on the screen. And I was getting file copy dialogues and error dialogues that just had a bunch of question marks and blocks all over the place, even though if you open them in ResEdit, they look perfect. If you go into the source code and edit them in the source code and recompile it, then you don't have that problem. So very recently, I started doing that instead, and that is what you see here. Most of it is quite nice, I think, and I have very little problem with it. And we've got the NDA titles and everything, and we've got dialog boxes, we have info windows, and almost everything is just right. However, there are a few issues that you might see, like here. All of the window title bars cannot display the Japanese text. So what you're seeing is the Finder trying to read JMT, which is the Japanese character encoding, and display it in Shaston, which doesn't really work. And sysfont NDA is supposed to change the system font, but just these two areas, in the window title bar and in the Finder info headers, don't work at all for that with the sysfont NDA, and I'm still working on figuring out why that is and how to fix it. Also, you'll see a few areas. Let me see if I fix this, if I can show you one. Okay, I fixed that. Here's another area where there's a problem. This is one of those LE text box 2 strings, and I can go into ResEdit and I can just highlight the text and change the font manually, but I have not found a way just yet to do this in the source and compile the source and have it just work out of the box. So what I'm doing right now is cheating a little bit and changing these text boxes in ResEdit after I build it. And fortunately, there are only 3 text boxes like that in the Finder. So those are the existing problems. I showed you how text editing after input can get messed up because of character width recognition issues and issues with not changing the system font. But this is a start, and for the most part, it's pretty good. Also, file names can't be in Japanese because that's just a complete no-go right now. ProDOS file system and all. But however, if you notice the trash icon, the font is no issue. It's just the file names cannot be that because trash is a special window and it's not actually a file in the file system, so we can get away with the trash already. So, let's see. Also, here's one more problem. When you have icons and menus, and these separators, you'll see that what happens here is JM starts processing the string like it's Japanese text, and it makes the first part a Japanese character, and then it doesn't do the rest because it's not actually supposed to be Japanese text. And you see that in one other place here with the sysfont NDA. It does the same thing because there's an icon there, but everything else is fine. So that is also another problem. That has to do with the way that it intercepts requests to draw text to the screen and with the character width issues. So what needs to happen from now, and you may have seen a little bit about compiling from source, and we had a HackFest entry last year that involved a bug fix for Teach. So parts of this can be done, and I can at least tell you that I know how to compile a Finder, not really a systems programming expert, but I do know at least a little bit about how the Finder works at this point, and some things that I would like to see in the future that could be helped with this are implementing something in the system itself that allows you to change the system font and bypass this whole NDA that has a problem with doing this, and also figure out how to have more control over things like window titles and Finder info header. And fortunately for future development, if anybody wants to write nice, pretty Japanese Apple IIGS GUI software, a lot of the issues with these, I believe, are with these legacy resource types that Apple uses in the Finder that nobody else needs to use anymore. So fixing this text, I believe, is going to be mainly a Finder issue and not something that people are going to have to worry about for future development. So sysfont NDA is a very nice tool, but it should ideally be replaced by something that's built in. And also, if we take a look at the character encoding issue, we have a program called Kanji Edit that I have been using to do all of this. So we have a file. And I can type some text. And I can save this file as JMT text format, which is the native format used by the 2GS that is just for JM. And I can also save it in Shift.jis, which will allow you to put it out to any other typical computer platform and view the text just fine. So the first thing I did when I started trying to localize the Finder from the source instead of by resource editing it was I got on my Mac and I started typing in text in the source, and then I compiled it and I put it on the 2GS, and I got garbage all over the screen. And the reason was because the Mac is using Shift.jis, which is a legacy encoding. Now everybody's using Unicode, but at the time most consumer platforms were using this encoding. Unix machines used EUC, which was another encoding. So I was feeding all of this Shift.jis and the resource strings to the GS, and that didn't work with JM. And I dug a little bit deeper and looked at the documentation and found out that you need to have it in JMT text format for it to draw it as a UI element. For documents, you can have everything in Shift.jis, and everything is fine that way and portable. But if you're programming and you want to write strings for the UI, you have to do that, which is kind of a problem because I'm over on my Mac and I'm editing all of the strings in MPW, and it's all saved and it's all ready to go. And for each file that I localize, I have to send it over to the 2GS and convert the source file to JMT and then send it back to the Mac and compile it after doing that. So there was a little bit of a USB stick shuffle going on in my computer room while I was doing all of this a couple of months ago. It was kind of tedious, and also the GS was unaccelerated at the time. It now has been for about 2 days. So it took a long time to get all of that done, but this is mostly complete, and I would not say that it's release quality at this point, but it's a good proof of concept, and it's what I'm using. So that's where we are now, and if you want to localize a 2GS program, that unfortunately right now is the procedure you have to follow. Now maybe somebody who is feeling a little bit more enterprising could write a program for the classic Mac that does this conversion on its own. But I am not a classic Mac OS developer at this point. Maybe we'll see about that sometime in the future, but it seems a little bit like an ambitious project to start getting into that. So these are all potential things, and I feel like I'm really just beginning because this sat for a while. I didn't really have a good 2DS setup with a good way to get files to and from the 2DS without swapping zip disks all over the place. So that got fixed, and I eventually started working on this, and we have us a Finder. And while I was doing that, since we're here, I decided, maybe somebody would like something from me that doesn't really require you to know Japanese to appreciate. So while I was in there, I took a little bit of a look at how things are handled. And one thing that always bothered me about the 2DS Finder is that if you want to go up a directory, then you basically have to Mac habits die hard. Open Apple click the title bar and go back like this, and that's fine. But I really want to do it with the keyboard like I can on a Mac, so you may have seen me doing this earlier, but I edited the Finder to allow you to open Apple up arrow to go up a directory, and you can option key to close the parent window behind you. That was really driving me crazy, so I took a break from localizing and figured out how to do that. And pretty basic, but there you have it. So this is my 2GS environment, and this is, I feel like, hopefully a beginning, and I am going to continue working on this and see where I can go. And I have a few dialog boxes that I need to push around and fix, because if you look in the source, you'll find some dialog boxes that have, say, three separate strings for text that go in the same dialog box. And what the developers have done is just manually decided, here's how many characters go in this line, and this line, and this line. And when you're doing translation, that gets really hairy, and you have to be careful with that. And basically what you have to do is you have to edit it and make a good best guess, and then compile it and see how it looks on screen. And if it doesn't look good, you've got to go back and compile it again, and repeat the shuffle with editing files, take it to the 2DS, convert it, take it back, all of that. So, but everything is pretty much here. So that's the Finder and Teach. And also, there are a handful of other things I did. All of the NDAs, CD remote controller, control panel, the main control panel, not all of the individual modules just yet, and find file, and a calculator. So I currently have 6 elements that are localized. And what I would like to do now is, since this is really kind of just a framework, and I'm showing you this existing software, and I think it's really great, and it has to go through a bunch of contortions to work on a 2DS, and maybe in the further future, this can be used to do something a little bit more natural. And what I've been able to do with it so far, and what some of the limitations are, I would like to take some questions from anyone who may want me to show them something, or may have a question about how all of this works on the back end, or maybe about the history, perhaps. Okay. Let's go right to left. Andy?
You said that you discovered the Facebook group of the original group that worked on this. Have you traded your info, and have they responded in a positive way?
I told them that what I was doing and that I'm working on this. To be honest, I have not been really active on Facebook because I kind of don't really know how to use Facebook very well, to be honest. And I told them I was doing this, and I asked them if they would share their source code with me, and they shared all of it. They're all really great, and they've all been extremely helpful, and they all seemed pretty interested. I have not posted any of this yet because I feel like there are still some issues to hammer out, and if anybody wants it, then I will gladly provide a copy. But I'm not really going and saying this is the release and this is it. So it's not on the group, but they do know what I'm doing, and that I'm trying to improve the localization of the OS.
Most of the GS team, are they native Japanese or Japanese speakers that use English as a second language, or?
The people who wrote the software?
Right.
Yes, all the people that I have communicated with are native Japanese speakers, and also quite proficient in English as well, because I have read the documentation that they wrote, and all of the binary releases of this software, and a lot of this stuff is on Asimov, although it's kind of disorganized, is bilingual Japanese and English. Although I didn't communicate with them in English, but the documentation is there, and there is English documentation that's available. I do have some documentation that's only in Japanese, and I could translate that for anyone who's interested in reading it. But yes, all of the people who wrote this software are based in Japan and native Japanese speakers. Eric?
So you mentioned that Japanese file names and ProDOS, they obviously can't be done at this point. But what about on HFS?
HFS?
Yes.
Not yet, because it's an issue with, well, I've got an HFS partition here. Let's see what happens. So I can make a file, and what it's going to do is, I don't think it's going to let me. See, I can't. It just gets angry if I try and switch into the Japanese input mode.
Okay.
So
Is that a Finder issue, or is that a file system handler issue?
I am not that well versed in the HFS file system's internals. I would imagine.
Japanese file names on the Mac.
That I actually haven't tried yet because I've been focused on the localizing, and I took a detour for the Finder Open Apple Up Arrow thing because, as I said, it was kind of driving me crazy. I really wanted to have it, but
You use the Japanese versions of like Mac OS 7, Mac OS 8.
right.
Those can do Japanese file names.
Yes, I have a Quadra in my room that has a Japanese Mac OS on it, and that's actually the machine that I built all of this on. I could try to mount a ProDOS image and dump it on the CFFA 3000 with some Japanese file names and see what happens. I think what would happen is you would get garbage text, because this whole thing is written to use the JMT encoding, and if you get Japanese file names from a Mac, the file names are going to be in Shift.js, which the 2GS understands, but it can't use them to draw UI elements.
Right.
So I think what'll happen is you'll get something looking roughly like this Finder info string header bar at the top, except it'll be slightly different because it'll be SGIS garbage instead of JMT garbage. Sally?
All right. So my question is this: at some point, are you going to work on adding different Japanese fonts, or is this one your baby forever?
This font is okay. I think it's fine. I'm not particularly attached to it, although I see no need to replace it as a screen font. However, what I want is something like sysfont NDA as a system element where, and this is something that's not just for Japanese users, but for any users, where you can choose an arbitrary font to be your system font, and it doesn't really matter. So I think what will happen is if I or somebody else or a group of people goes down the road of implementing sysfont NDA's capabilities in the system itself, then the side effect will be that you get that.
Even after you started, so you said this already, I apologize, but you said it shows a picture of somebody with an Apple IIc that was in Japanese?
That's correct.
That was sold by Apple?
No, Apple never did anything in Japanese for the Apple II, so everything that I'm showing in the images is done by this group.
Well, there was the Apple IIJ Plus, there was an Apple II Plus that had...
Oh, we do have, I always forget about the J Plus, I'm sorry.
I mean, that one you had to do a code and had Control T, and then you could type some things in Kanji, and you know, it was sort of a workaround back when they couldn't do anything, but Apple never did anything for this language later on.
I will give some context as to where the J Plus stands in relation to all of this. What the J Plus could do was have with katakana, which is basically, it's hard to draw a direct comparison, but it's kind of like, it's not quite like typing English in all caps. It's much more of a big deal because I can show you, I'll just show you here. what it looks like. Let's get into a text editor. So you saw me typing some text, and I typed these syllabary characters in Japanese. So we can type and see, this is what I have to do. I have to go down and search through all of these characters because there isn't, I can't type them as a sentence and have it be picked based on context. So
Kanji, right?
yes. So these are kanji, and I've typed in, these are called hiragana, and they say kan, so it's kan for the first character in kanji, and I will find it. I accidentally went forward a couple pages. One thing that's really good about this is after you start using it, it's much more rudimentary than a modern system, but a modern Japanese input system will learn which words and characters you use the most often, and it will offer them up first. And you can also customize the dictionary. If you start going through and doing this, and we also need, so one other problem with this is, not a problem, but just a limitation of the current state, is that this is she, and if I type it as G, it's voiced, and it has these two marks here. The conversion only understands the ones without the voice marks, so they all get put in the same thing, and that makes it take a little bit longer to search. So we would come down here, and here's the one I want. So this is kanji. In katakana, it looks like this, and if I hit shift, it's a little bit off screen because the second site is doing something, but here's the difference. So it's in kanji, and we can also do it in hiragana. So this all says the same thing. The top one is how you would actually encounter it in real Japanese text. The second one is katakana, which is used mostly for foreign loanwords in the present standard. For example, you would have kamera or radio or pan, which are all loanwords for European languages for camera, radio, and bread, respectively. Pan is from Portuguese. And you would write them in katakana. And then at the bottom you have hiragana, which is used for the endings of native Japanese words. Like you'll have, let's see, one that I can do with, I've got to, see, this takes a little bit more thought because there are two different, there are at least two pronunciations for most characters. Some have one, some have more than two. There is the native Japanese pronunciation, and there is a pronunciation kind of like loanwords from Middle French in English that are, they're loanwords from Middle Chinese. So if I have, there we go. So the reading of this character that's called the on reading, it's from Middle Chinese, is tsu. So I type tsu to get the character, and then I get this, and what you end up with is actually pronounced kayol. So this is a verb. It's an unconjugated dictionary form verb, and this is the verb root that is written with a kanji, and the pronunciation is kayol, and then the last character is a hiragana, u, which is what you change to conjugate the verb. So this is just a basic overview of the standards of written Japanese, and that comes into effect with this input method because when I was typing this verb on a modern system, you just type ka, yo, u, and then you get these two characters. You can't do that on a 2GS because you have to type in the on reading, tsu, and then type that character individually on its own, and then keep going. And that's just a limitation of the dictionary right now because it's all one-to-one conversions. It's got this big table with all of the characters that correspond to all of these different syllables that you type in, and you have to do them all one by one. On a modern system, it's all context-based, and you can just type in whole strings of text, and it will take a look at what you've typed in and guess based on context what you want, and it's usually correct. So what you've hit upon is why it's so much harder, and the problem with the J+ is that it can only do these. And that makes it really, really hard to read. and really uncomfortable to use on a day-to-day basis. And I believe only about 5,000 J pluses were sold. I think that's the number I saw. I'm not that well versed on the J plus, but the reason why I believe is because you really only bought a machine like that if you really needed it. Like say you're running some sort of database for business, and it's inconvenient that you can only do katakana, but it still allows you to get your work done.
And that Apple IIc was katakana also?
The Apple IIc did all of them, but that was something that Suzuki did much later in the mid 90s. So that was not something that you could buy that was produced by Apple. This was all custom by the user group members.
And did he use some of these tricks to get some of the other characters with the keyboard and by typing the extra key to get the character?
Right.
That, what you see, was that software or hardware?
That's all software. Like I said, there was an attempt made to do a ROM, and it didn't really pan out. So basically, everything that was ever done that's pretty much complete is all software. All right, so
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I do have one kind of good question for you.
okay.
There were a lot of steps involved in figuring all of this out,
Yes.
and it is impressive all of the work you've put into it. But had you started over from the beginning, knowing what you know now, what is the order you would have done things in?
The order of localizing the operating system, or
Yes.
well, let's see. I started out resource editing because I didn't have the source code, so that was the only thing I could do, and I didn't know the first thing about 2DS assembly, and I still only know a few things, I think. But I would probably if I knew what I knew now and I had the source code, then I would just start out localizing it in the source, and it would have taken me a little bit less time because I didn't have to figure out the whole issue with the text encodings. So I wouldn't say that there are a whole lot of dead ends, other than that I wasted a lot of time at KFest 2012 resource editing it just to have something that kind of half worked. And if that was possible, if everything that is possible now was possible then that wouldn't have happened. But so I feel pretty comfortable with the general approach, and it's been a learning process going along, and there wasn't really a whole lot of pursuing something that ended up not working. It was basically more of a process of just gradually working towards the solution, and pretty much everything brought me a little bit further forward. So one thing I will say is that if anybody is interested in having their OpenApple Up Finder, they can find me and I can get them one, but I need to compile it in English. So that'll take me a little bit of extra time. I'd like to work on that this afternoon. So that's basically what I've been working on, and what I'd really like to do next is, and I'm not up here saying I'm definitely going to do this and it's going to be done next week, but where I see myself going next are two things. The first thing I want to do is find out why I can't display Japanese text, why I can't change the font to JM Gothic in window title bars and in Finder info headers. And the second thing I want to do after that would be to find out how to get these LE text box, the about box strings. Actually, I fixed those, but the Finder preferences text in bold in the Finder preference window was the first one. The other two text strings that have that problem with being styled and not being in the right font are this one and this one. So after figuring out how to get these to work, I think that's the most important thing, because this is pretty terrible, just having all of this garbage text on the screen and having your name, size, etc. not working. So I really want to get that done first. That's a really big loose end. And then I would like to find out how to get the source code to properly describe how these work. And you don't have to go back and resource edit to touch up the fonts. After that, I think the next step really needs to be getting the system itself in some control panel that's built in to allow you to arbitrarily pick a screen font. And that's good for everybody, because I don't know how everybody feels about Shaston. Some of you maybe don't like it. not sure. But I need this because I need to be able to guarantee that every single character displayed on the screen is going to be damn Gothic unless I'm in a style editor and I change it myself. Yeah?
On the iPad input, did you do anything to handle any differences at the time dates?
Oh yes, there is a little thing about that. If you look at the English Finder, and I think I have an English Finder, so I can actually, just in case some of you don't remember. I kept it. In the English Finder, default from Apple, your title text here is info on and then it's in quotes. And that works pretty well for English, but it's not a really good word order for Japanese. So if we go back to the Japanese Finder, get info in the same file, you'll see that there is no text to the left of the file name. So, because what you'll do is, it's GSOS Joel, which you can't see because it's garbled text, it's JMT that Shaston is trying to display and it can't. But I had to go into the source code for the get info window and basically just get rid of some of the variables that it was pushing to the stack to draw this to the screen, and make it so that only the text was only displayed after the file name to make it proper for the localization. And if anybody gets interested in doing additional languages for the 2GS, this is one of the problems that they're going to face, and it's a fairly minor problem because it's pretty obvious what's going on, and you just have to go and take out some variables or add extra ones, and then assemble your string to push for whatever tool call you're going to do to draw your interface element. But that is the only place so far that I've had to do this. But if anybody out there speaks languages other than English and is interested in doing this for that language, this is something you'll have to be mindful of, is that you might occasionally have to not just edit strings, but also reposition things in the source code to get it with the file names and everything properly. Again,
If somebody else wants to work on a different language, would you help somebody, get started with any modifications and help like that?
Absolutely, yes. We have more questions?
How many characters are there in the Japanese alphabet, and how do they fit this onto a keyboard? I mean, it's I imagine the keyboard's got to be about the same size as our familiar. That's
Yes,
it.
I will show you. There are 46 characters in each kana syllabary, and as far as the kanji, there are many, many thousands. Generally, people use about 2,000 or so in daily life, give or take. If you look at this keyboard, I'm not going to query this, but okay. Let's see. So you have a kana printed for each Roman alphabet character key, and so there's 46 of them. So a couple of them are doubled up, and you'll also see that they go onto the number row. And so here are the ones that are doubled up here. This one, and actually that's the only one. So that's how that works. In order to get everything, they basically just use a number row. And there are a couple of extra keys over here that the English one doesn't have. You can see the shift is shorter to accommodate that. So a modern machine works similarly to how it is on the 2GS, where you type things in the way they're pronounced, and then you hit the space bar or this conversion key here next to the space bar, and the software generates likely candidates for kanji that you want to use. And especially after you've been using it for a while, it learns and it gets pretty smart. So you don't have to accommodate all of those kanji on the keyboard. You just type in based on the sounds. And actually, this is a little bit of an older style to type one-on-one. Here's a kana, here's a kana, here's a kana. Usually what people do is they type it in Roman characters, and then it converts that way. And I can actually show you, if you're interested, on the modern machine, what that looks like. If you go back here. just need to get the oh, sorry, I plugged into this instead. Okay, so we go over here, got a terminal, and I start typing. That's how I do it. And that says kanji. You can also go and you can switch to Roman character mode. Running out of screen space here on this projector, but I haven't switched this in a long time. I have to find out where it goes. This is where you switch it. So we'll switch to Roman. And we'll come back here. And that should get me. Oh, no. Didn't. Let me just kill it. Sometimes it doesn't do a very good job of switching, and this is just my crazy Linux Japanese input method. Depending on which one you're using, you may not have to worry about this. And let me make sure it's actually in English mode.
It seemed like you hit cancel instead of okay.
Well, I hit apply first, so it's okay. It's got it now, and let's see if it actually... So now if I do it, you'll see that it's not going straight to Japanese characters one-on-one, but I'm typing in English characters, and it's converting them as I go along. And I'm typing it super slow so that you can see it. But that's the difference between the two methods of input. Most people in Japan type it in Roman characters, and it comes out that way. So that's how it works.
What about commercial products, something like, say, electronic equipment? If it's being sold in Japan, do they put Japanese language on it, or is it in English?
Like on the indicator lights or the front panels.
Yeah, things like stereo amplifiers, computers. I mean, would they have the Japanese, or would it be in English?
Meaning, like, say, like power or line in and stuff like that. It depends. Some things do and some things don't.
Oh.
It really depends on how the manufacturer feels like doing it.
I have two things from those that are with us via Ustream. Someone called Earl R. Evans says, Arigato from Omishiroi. And Think Mac says, what applications are you planning on translating, and are there any favorites in particular?
The ultimate answer to that question is all of them, or at least everything that comes with GSOS. I happen to be a really big fan of the macOS Finder, so when I first started doing Apple II stuff in like 2010 or so, I was pretty excited to find out that the 2DS had a Finder that works pretty much exactly like the macOS Finder. So I really liked the idea of localizing the Finder, and that was the first thing I went to, and I really had a lot of fun doing it. And it's not entirely finished yet. There's a little bit of polishing up to do in terms of alignment of text and all. So I think I'm going to have to answer the Finder as my favorite. That might be a boring answer to some of you who have your favorite third-party software and all, but I'm a big Finder fan, and I really like messing with the Finder. So.
How difficult is it to get Japanese characters like from a newspaper into speech or some other 2GS processor?
From a newspaper, like a printed newspaper?
Yeah, the content out of the...
You basically just have to type them. Not very hard, although it is going to be slower on a 2GS than on a modern machine because of the issues we discussed, where you have to go one character at a time instead of typing in whole sentences at a time and letting it use the context to help the conversion candidates. Have any more questions from the back? I think I saw some hands that didn't get picked up. But
How does cutting and pasting work? Can you actually, if you're cutting and pasting the text from one document to another, scan, and paste it into the other document?
Yes, you can cut and paste, and let's just We're back here doing the super old school, just swapping cables instead of being all modern. Yeah, I have a bad history with KVMs actually, so it's a good thing we don't have one up here actually, I think. Oh, I actually could have used applications. And I realize it's 2:30 now, so trying to just do this really quick. But yeah, the thing is, you get when you have a string of text that's in JMT, it stays consistent even if it's passing through something that can't display it. Like when I open up these source files on my Mac and I see all the strings, it's all just gibberish on the Mac because the Mac has no idea how to handle this 2GS specific character encoding. But I can edit the file, I can save it, and nothing gets disturbed because it's just the bits are in there and they're not interfered with. And then it's just that this software on the 2GS is the only one that actually knows, oh, this is Japanese text and this is how I read it, and I can align it with this font. So we can. And did you notice that because I typed this character before, it was already there? That's the first candidate. So it starts to learn like that, and it makes it a lot easier. This, and again, it's going to be the first one because it was the last one that I based. It's very simple. Most other ones will actually have some nice processing to give you the ones that it thinks you need the most. But what this does is it basically just puts the ones that you have last used at the front of the list in chronological order, which is pretty handy, and I think that's a pretty good way to do it for the 2GS, which is not quite as capable. And see, I lost it again because I went back and I missed part of the character. So up here. So here's the text. We've got it. Cut, paste, new document, paste. Everything's fine. All right, well, we have hit our hour, and it looks like we've got a couple of minutes. So if there are any final questions, I will try to fit them in before we start to take things apart here.
Another one from Ustream from an anonymous user, and one from ThinkMac. Think wants to know, what about Japanese keyboards with the 2GS?
Oh, that's a good question. And the other one?
Is typing right now. So.
Oh, okay. The question from Think is actually a really good one because I use Japanese keyboards on everything, and typing with this American keyboard really drives me crazy, just like not having OpenApple up in the Finder. And I really want to get a Japanese ADB keyboard working on the 2GS. That is a little bit advanced for me, but I would like to start digging into it. I just feel like I need to fix some of these cosmetic issues with my existing work first. But there actually is, if you look in the source, there's some placeholder code for many, many, many different countries, far more than you can actually see in the production release CDA that allows you to choose your keyboard layout. So there is very likely something that can be done there, and that would probably have to be a two-step thing. The first step would be to actually get the layout of the Roman keys recognized and supported, and then after that happens, for somebody like me who likes to do the old-fashioned way with one key for one character instead of doing it in Roman characters, you would also have to update the input method to recognize the key presses in that fashion instead of typing in Roman characters. So two-step process, a little bit more advanced, but I'm confident that it can be done with the right people and the right knowledge and the right amount of time. So I'm looking forward to getting there in the future.
And I guess the other person chickened out.
Oh, didn't know it was that scary. Okay. If there aren't any more questions, I'd like to thank you all for coming. I would like to thank very much Tyler and Eric and Corey and Jeff, who helped me bring all this stuff down here at the last minute and get ready for presentation on time. I'd like to thank Suzuki and Ushi and everyone in the FApple group who were willing to share their materials with me and tell me their stories and give the support for me to do this session and talk about what they've done, because this is basically, I've been coming here for a long time. Well, not a long time. This is my 5th KFest. And for a couple of years I was really looking for my sort of 2GS calling. What am I going to do? What's going to really get me excited? And this is basically it. So I'm starting to get going here, and I feel like I finally kind of have the right environment set up to start working on this. So I'm really glad that I was finally able to contact the authors and share my excitement about their software with them. and that they were supportive of me presenting about them here. So thank you, everyone.
Yay. Okay, so at 2:45, we have a half hour built in for new product announcements. I don't know if anybody has any. Does anybody, just off the bat?
At least one that's gonna come out.
I got it. So we'll have that for a little bit, and then we're gonna basically have to clear the tables, make a row around the edges. We could use help for that. We need surface area for people to set up their own computers and to sell their stuff. So we'll be doing that, and if we get it set up by 3:30, we got a good 2 solid hours. In between that, during that, we're gonna also get the HackFest judging done, and then people can come and present their HackFest so we can all see what.
Give me my second slide back. You can't have it.
So stretch break for now, though. Oh, you have a question?